Creative Mind, Exploring the Art of Thinking by Forrest Kinney. Running is not a verb. I was told very early in my life, and perhaps you were too, that running is a verb. But running is not a verb in this sentence. It's a noun, a kind of noun called a verbal noun or gerund. Consider this sentence. Here, yoga is a noun. And here, tennis is a noun. And here, jogging is a noun, even though it looks like a verb. So here, out of the various parts of speech, running would be a noun. I like his running shoes. Here, running is functioning as an adjective describing shoes. It's called a verbal adjective, but it's still an adjective. She is running for office. Now finally, in this sentence, running functions as a verb. But wait, she won the contest for 5 years running. Here, running is an adverb. So by now, I really can't say that running is a verb because it can be so many things. It's a verb in this sentence, it's an adjective in this one, a noun in this one, and an adverb in this one. This is a picture of a red barn. Red is an adjective, barn is a noun. But wait, isn't this color called barn red? Then barn is the adjective, and red is the noun. The man volunteers often. Here, man is a noun, and volunteers is a verb. Volunteers man the phone. Wait, volunteers is now the noun, and man is now the verb. And in this new expression, he's down in his man cave. Man is an adjective. Man, it happened again. Here, man is an interjection, another part of speech. So we are taught to think that man is a noun and running is a verb. But this is faulty thinking, an extremely common type of faulty thinking. Nouns and verbs and adjectives and other parts of speech are words that describe the roles that words play, the relationship that words have to one another. They are not words in the normal sense. They are categories of words. They're labels. So if we filled in these sentences with the role names, the names of the categories, these sentences don't make much sense. She is verb to the sale. I like his adjective shoes. They make sense when we think of the capitalized words as roles or categories that we want filled. So we can put running in to fill the verb role, or running to fill the adjective role, or running to fill the noun role. Then things make some sense. Or we could plug in other words that could play these roles in these sentences. So we have two levels going on here. We have words that describe the roles that words play, and the actual words that play the roles, which are always changing. We like to say that running is a verb because it most often is, and probably was born a verb, and so we make a strict alignment between these two levels. But to say running is a verb is to confuse, that is, fuse together these two levels of thinking. One level which describes the roles of words in a language, and then the many different word actors that play these roles. The problem is that when we say running is a verb, this implies that running cannot also be a noun, that it would break some sort of rule, or that running cannot be an adjective. It's this sort of discrimination that is the problem with such faulty thinking. It causes endless problems, as we shall explore. On the most obvious level, this understanding allows us more creativity with language, something Shakespeare would applaud. Some scholars have said that he contributed over 1,700 words and phrases to the English language, many of which we use every day. Words like bedroom, eyeball, excitement, generous, lonely, and fashionable. Many of these words came about because Shakespeare wasn't so concerned about words having a fixed identity. The word beach, formerly employed only as a noun, became a working-class adjective instead. Blush had only acted as a noun, but suddenly found itself to be playing the role of a bashful verb. We say river is a noun, but it's an adjective in river raft. Well, what about a verb? Ideas were rivering through my mind. Now, some may find that a bit odd sounding because it's not been heard before, but this is the nature of language play and innovation. Words move around and play different roles. There will be some who say, but river is still a noun and running is still a verb. Some people hate that categories are fluid and that language changes and that people play in these ways. But the irony is that these people will likely praise Shakespeare, who practiced this very art. I bet Shakespeare would say to these people that the actor is not to be confused with the role he or she is playing. And so an actor can play many roles. Likewise, words can play many roles. Let's explore how this faulty way of thinking impacts our lives in other ways. When I was a child, this was a nurse and this was a doctor. A doctor was a man and a nurse was a woman. Genders were firmly identified with these two categories. But in my lifetime, we have thankfully seen how absurd this is, and now it can be either way. So this is a doctor. Women can now be pilots, priests, and soccer pros, all because the strict and faulty identification of gender with job categories has been freed. In my field of music, I was taught that major keys were happy and minor keys were sad. This is a rather ridiculous simplification that once again excludes options and makes our lives poorer. Though it is the way most of the time, some of the saddest, most poignant music ever written is in major keys. And this upbeat music is in the key of A minor. The roles we play in our lives are also categories. Let's talk about relationships that have a hierarchy built into them. Consider when the teacher thinks, I am the teacher and you are the student. This is appropriate most of the time, but for the relationship to be creative and enjoyable and mutually beneficial, the teacher has to allow that sometimes the student has something to teach while the teacher has something to learn from the student. Likewise, in the parent-child relationship. Though the parent is usually the guide, the one in charge, the relationship is creative and most alive when the parent can be childlike and let the child be the guide once in a while. As Khalil Gibran once said, keep me from the pride that does not bow its head before a child. The same holds true for the relationship of leader to follower. If the leader doesn't listen to the followers, if the leader is not also a follower now and then the relationship will sour and not be good for anyone. When a group says that we are right and they are wrong, this fixed attitude can keep them from seeing and admitting the times when they are right and we are wrong. It's interesting how often people who preach morality are discovered to be hiding a very dark secret. So now let's talk about slinkies. Many of us played with them as children. There's over 300 million of them out in the world. An engineer was using special springs to try to come up with a way to protect instruments on ships and accidentally knocked one over. He noticed the graceful way it moved. Now, if he'd had a fixed mind, he would have said that this spring is a tool and that other thing there is a toy. But he allowed the spring to jump into that category, and the slinky was born. Likewise, Play-Doh. It was sold as a cleaning product for dirty wallpaper. But the manufacturer learned that kids were playing with it, so they added colors and removed the cleansers, and Play-Doh was born. Categories such as verbs and nouns are not prison cells. They are various rooms in a house that we can often move freely between. Just because running usually functions as a verb, that doesn't mean that it's somehow the correct way or the right way or the only way. So if I believe I'm a verb, then that doesn't mean I can't allow myself to experience being a noun or an adjective. Categories are roles, not rules. We are much more than these labels. So we have to be careful when we say, I am A. We can't forget that in identifying ourselves with A, that we may also be able to be B, C, or D, or all of the above. Otherwise, we are excluding creative options and shrinking our lives down to what we know. As Shakespeare once said, we know what we are, but not what we may be.